The President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, found himself in a complete stalemate. Trump demanded help from allies to resume shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, through which about 1/5 of the world's energy resources usually pass. All of Trump's allies refused to help him, so Trump has already stated that he didn't need any help anyway, and that all the allies are traitors. But this raises an extremely important topic for analysis. Even if Trump somehow miraculously manages to assemble a broad international military coalition, it will be extremely difficult to put an end to Iran's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. In response to the US and Israeli strike on February 28th, Iran used drones, missiles, and mines, making this strategically important waterway unsafe for the huge oil and gas tankers that used to pass through the strait every day at extremely low speeds. And now Trump's team can't answer exactly how they plan to unblock the Strait of Hormuz. My name is Alex Ipeci, and this is my own project, Conspiracy Theories, where together with you we debunk such appealing conspiracy theories and soberly analyze complex geopolitical processes. So right now, Trump is facing an almost unsolvable problem. How can the Strait of Hormuz be unblocked if allies and partners refuse to go to war against Iran? Let's start with the basics. Why did Iran decide to block the Strait of Hormuz right now in the first place? The threat to close the Strait of Hormuz has been voiced more than once before. In 2011, the commander of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said that closing it would be, quote, easier than drinking a glass of water. Quote, warnings about the possibility of closing the strait from Iranian intelligence services continued afterwards as well. For example, during periods of heightened tension around Iran's nuclear program in 2016 and 2018, as well as during Israeli and American bombings in June 2025, analysts have always considered the closure of the Strait of Hormuz to be an extreme measure, taking into account the long-term strategic consequences for the adversary, as well as the threat of a retaliatory strike against its own energy sector. And over time, threats to block the Strait of Hormuz stopped being taken seriously because for many years Iran threatened, but in fact never actually took action. But the war with Iran, which began on February 28th with the assassination of its supreme leader, simply wiped out all previous calculations. Iranian officials describe this conflict as a war for survival, and the Revolutionary Guard Corps is increasingly taking the initiative in shaping the country's war strategy. But the main question here is, what is at stake? A rather narrow waterway between Iran and Oman, connecting the Persian Gulf with the Gulf of Oman, is the only exit to the open sea. For oil and gas producing countries such as Iraq, Iran, Qatar, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates. There's also Saudi Arabia, which appears to have access to the open sea via the Red Sea. Oil prices briefly rose to the highs of 2022 on Monday. According to United Nations data, high oil prices could trigger a new cost of living crisis, similar to what happened in 2022. Moreover, the UN has already calculated that in the coming days, tens of millions of people will be at risk of hunger. A prolonged conflict could also trigger a shock in the fertilizer market, posing a threat to global food security. According to Kepler, about 33% of petroleum products and global fertilizer supplies, including sulfur and ammonia, pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Fears of a global economic crisis, similar to the one that followed the oil shocks in the Middle East in the 1970s, could also intensify in the event of a prolonged war. But one might wonder, why is it so difficult to ensure the safety of shipping in the Strait of Hormuz? That's the most interesting question, and it actually answers the next question. Why will it be so difficult for Trump to unblock the Strait of Hormuz? And here it's very important to look at the geography. The shipping lanes are only 2 nautical miles wide in this area. Both ships and tankers make a sharp turn right opposite the islands belonging to Iran and the mountainous coast, which provides cover for the Iranian military. Basically, the tankers passing through the strait are always exposed and easy to see. The regular Iranian navy has been largely destroyed. including fast boats, mini submarines, mines, and even jet skis packed with explosives. In addition to this, according to experts, Tehran has the capacity to produce about 10 drones per month. And here, it would seem possible to try to ensure the passage of a certain number of ships, but this is very difficult. For example, to allow 3 to 4 tankers per day to pass through the Strait of Hormuz under current conditions, an additional 7 to 8 destroyers would be needed to provide air cover for each of these tankers. Plus, we must not forget that the Iranians now have these drones, both underwater and surface drones, which can attack on the water. Therefore, to carry out this task consistently over the course of months would require a huge amount of resources. Even if Iran loses the ability to use ballistic missiles, drones, and floating mines, ships will still be threatened by kamikaze attacks. Kamikaze drones? They're not going anywhere? Obviously, if the war continues for several weeks, some form of tanker escort will definitely be organized. But returning to pre-war supply volumes in this format will be extremely difficult. As a result, Trump demanded on Sunday that a number of countries send warships to the Persian Gulf. A week earlier, he instructed the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation to provide shipping companies with insurance and guarantees. But even before Trump made his demand, French President Emmanuel Macron said that several European and Asian countries were planning to organize a joint mission to provide protection. But only after the war is over. Germany immediately stated that it is skeptical even about the efforts of the European mission in the Red Sea because it considers them to be ineffective. Not to mention the deployment of ships to the Strait of Hormuz. Japan and Australia announced on Monday that they do not intend to send warships to escort vessels through the strait. So even the hypothetical scenario we discussed is very difficult to implement, and here we should also recall the experience of previous years. Yemeni Houthis blocked most of the shipping in the Red Sea for more than 2 years, despite the efforts of the US and European Union naval forces. There was already a coalition there, a joint coalition. Most shipping companies still use a significantly longer route around the southern tip of Africa. The Suez Canal is currently heavily underutilized. And that's even though the Houthis have stopped large-scale attacks on tankers. But what should be done then? And are there any alternative routes around the Strait of Hormuz? The United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia are trying to find ways to bypass this strait by building new oil pipelines. Both countries already have pipelines bypassing the Strait of Hormuz, but another problem arises. Today, the Houthis are threatening to block the Bab el-Mandeb Strait again. This is the Red Sea. And Iran attacked the Emirates oil terminal, which actually helps bypass the strait. By tanker, the Strait of Hormuz leads directly into the Gulf of Oman. That's why it will be extremely difficult for Trump to unblock the Strait of Hormuz. And he still has a big realization ahead of him that you can't offend allies and partners. After all, it's quite possible that you'll still have to turn to them for help. Friends, write your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. And if you want to support the work of our YouTube channel, you can leave your donation or sponsorship on YouTube or subscribe. All the links and details are in the description of this video. I will be grateful for any support from you. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.